And welcome to everyone who's listening to the presentation today. Like Jodie said, my name is Birgit Forstmaier-James. I'm an occupational therapist here at the Witherslack group. You might not see it on my face, but I've got over 20 years experience now, and actually the heading of today's talk, I'm really, really excited about, because for some of you who've already had some dealings with occupational therapists, life skills is what we do. It's all about making children independent and life skills. So I'm really excited to share that little bit of knowledge that I have gathered over the years of becoming an occupational therapist. And hopefully, I know there's probably a varied knowledge in the people that are listening today. So I hope I pitched it right, and everyone can take a little bit from this talk. So if we move on, when my slide moves on, there we go. So one of the key skills that we want to do as parents, as carers, as teachers, is we want to empower our children to becoming independent, both in relation to their actions, but also with their thinking. Becoming independent is really becoming confident in one's ability and be able to successfully to complete things, because otherwise we'll become reliant on others, and over time that's not just frustrating, but it also undermines our confidence in ourselves, in our dealing with others, especially our peers. And for children, that's a really, really vital skill, isn't it? Being part of their peers, being part of the other children and what they do. So having a look a little bit, because obviously we're talking about children with special needs here. And again, I'm sure most of you have probably seen many of these slides before. What do we mean by special educational needs? It's a term that describes children that have got difficulties in their learning. Sometimes it's described as a learning difficulty, sometimes it's described, if it's more severe, as a learning disability, which makes it harder for children to learn what most children are learning of the same age. So if you think it might be much more difficult to acquire early developmental milestones like crawling, walking, communicating, anything that a child needs to be able to do at their developmental age. And with special educational needs, children are more likely that they need help in order to either achieve those milestones or to compensate for what they cannot do. And the help that's out there, as probably a lot of you know, is special educational provision, which then schools can act upon. So we just started talking about why relationship building is important for children with special needs. And I hope you were all able to hear the sort of first 3 points. It was all around, children with special needs, when they don't have that success, they really need that trusting adult around them, and they need to experiencing different opportunities. So children with special needs, they're not only not succeeding in those things that they're finding difficult, they also observe others, especially their peers, and notice that other children might be able to find these things easier than they finding it themselves. And that lack of success, or they might not even be able to join in the skipping games that are going around them because they haven't quite managed to skip yet. So all of that is obviously impacting on a child's self-esteem, and they'll be able to progress, and to the motivation to wanting to progress as well. So through good relationships, what that means is that the adults around the child with special needs can identify the strengths and difficulties that the child presents with, and support them in a way that not only can build their self-esteem, but it also can increase their success in development and learning. And vice versa, like I said earlier, with a child that takes their first step, the child also needs to have that trust in that adult that they will be caught when things don't go so well, in order to take that leap of faith, to try something new, or to try something that they couldn't do before. Takes a lot of trust. I think we can all appreciate that, what that feels like. But if you think with a child with special needs who often struggles, that supportive environment, that support, that relationship with someone that to take them forward is really, really vital. So what do I mean by life skills? So life skills is really all the practical skills that our children need to learn to grow up into adulthood, learn to be functional in life, to be able to take care of themselves, to be independent, and to achieve their potential. And children, obviously, as you probably all know, they need to go through different developmental milestones in order to develop those coping strategies. And that starts from birth. A child just lifting their head off a flat surface when they're lying down, a newborn, is already a preparation to be able to walk later on. But all of these skills build up on these of each other. So a child, as said, it's lifting its head, it's starting to sit up, it's rolling, it's then crawling, it's then getting up to walk. So these skills are always building up on each other. A child cannot talk from the beginning. They try to communicate via their eyes, non-verbally, and via crying, before they then, over a very prolonged period of time, be able to communicate. And that could be verbally or non-verbally. It could be with a communication aid. But every step of our lives, in order for children to become independent, they need to go through those developmental milestones. And with it, complexity increases, and with it, the problem solving that the children need to be able to do. And here you can see a little bit of a pyramid as well, how these skills build up on each other. Now, there was in the past always a talk by therapists, oh my God, what if a developmental milestone is skipped? Does that mean the child won't be able to learn something? So a big example was, if a child is not able to crawl, can they walk? And the answer is yes. We can skip certain milestones and still become independent, but the foundation that gives us, so for example, a child that crawls might be will be building up better core strength stability and better shoulder girdle stability. So when they have to write later on, it might be easier for them, but it doesn't mean that a child who never crawled cannot progress with their handwriting. So where do we start in order to teach the children in our care, whether we're parents, whether we're teachers, whether we're carers, to teach the children in our care those life skills? And for me, there's really three big things that very much depends on. And those are, first of all, that we need to know the child's and your own skill sets. What are you good at and what's your child good at? It's always good to start with their strength, with your strength and with the child's strength. That's something you can build on. But in order to be able to know that, you really need to observe that child. You really, really need to get to know what is it they're good at and what is it that they're struggling with. What are you and your child's goals? Now, in the past, shoelaces was a really, really big thing that we needed to teach our children. With Velcro shoes, those goals are not becoming that important anymore, because, Velcro shoes are much more available even into adulthood now. So therefore, your child's goals might not be at all to do shoelaces, but yours are. Have a think about what's motivating for your child and what's motivating for you, because if you set both a goal that you can buy into, your success rate will be much, much bigger later on. What is your current life situation? I think that's a really, really important one for me, to take some of that burden, I think, that we as parents, I'm a parent myself, have on us. There's a lot of pressure. By the time they need to start school, they need to be able to be potty trained. There's a lot of books on what children should be doing at certain times, but it doesn't always fit within your current life situation, okay? And be kind to yourself. There's no point in you trying to practice something with your child if it doesn't fit in with you. If you're really, really stressed, but in a month's time that stress will go from work, then maybe give yourself that month, because when you're practicing, or when you're taking those skills, those difficulties on, when you're in a better place, you will have much quicker and much faster success than if you're doing it in a time when you really don't have the headspace for it. So what are the important things when I try and teach my child life skills? As I said before already, observe your child. Really look at what your child's doing and how they're doing it. We all do things differently because of the way our body is, the way our brain works. We all do things differently. Get to know each other. Get to know how you each learn. Practice at the right time. I'm talking to a lot of parents and like, oh my God, we're practicing dressing every morning, but the hectic lifestyle that we lead and being ready on time, it just is so crazy. And my advice would be, well, then don't practice it in the morning. Help your child get dressed in the morning so you're ready for school, you're calm and ready, and maybe practice the dressing skills during the weekend and just take that pressure off you. Don't put yourself under pressure. I already referred that. Evaluate where you're at with your life and do it when you're not under pressure. Have fun and be playful. Children, that's what they do. And I think a lot of us know the old Mary Poppins films where she clicks a finger and she sings a song and suddenly the room tidies it up itself. But the metaphor of that was, or the message from that is really, when we have fun and we do things playful, children will come with you. And so really think of ways. It doesn't always have to be that you practice your fine motor skills by doing the handwriting. It could be that you do a bit of Play-Doh and do some fun things with that. So try and be playful. Make it motivating for you and your child, leading on from the top. Not only make it playful, but make it sense for your child. Why am I practicing this? I don't want to learn shoelaces, then maybe we do Velcro, but we concentrate on maybe washing your hands first of all. And then you could say, well, if you wash your hands well, then, in school, you will be able to do that and go quicker out to break. So make it something that is important to you and your child. Make sure the right person does the right thing. It doesn't always have to be you doing everything. Sometimes a grandmother is much better to practice certain things, or a teacher is much better practicing certain things. So I always remember my child was late developing toileting skills. So I had a good chat with the teachers, and actually they were really, really supportive in how they can build in toileting strategies in school. And because my child was looking up to his teacher at that point very much, they had some really good relationship, and she was actually the best person to take that forward for me right now, and it took the pressure off me. So it just means that in that moment, have a think about who's the right person to practice with your child that life skill that you want to tackle. And it's okay to not learn everything. Again, like I said before, there's a lot of pressure on us parents for children to succeed and to learn a big variety of skills. Sometimes it's okay to say, no, not at this moment in time. Take calculated risks. What do I mean by that? The more older your child gets, the more the life skills that we teach them will be having a certain amount of risk inside them. Teaching your child to cut up vegetables will require a sharp knife. Using their cutlery skills, do I use a sharp knife? Do I use a blunt knife? Going onto the road, teaching them road skills. All of that, again, know your child and therefore take calculated risk. Some children are better with a sharper knife than others, but I think also don't be too afraid to sometimes let your child have a go. Right. So are there any techniques that I can use to help my child? And as occupational therapist, I will tell you again, the answer is yes. Now, in this slide, I will go quickly through a couple of sort of headings of techniques that we as occupational therapists use, and I can then go into a little bit more detail afterwards. Right, so be task detectives. Really get to know what your child can do and where the bits are that the child is falling down on. So within a task, what is it that your child can't do? And then we can use techniques like backward chaining and goal plan to check, which I will go in a bit more detail in a minute. Visual aids. Take out the talking wherever you can. I'm a big talker myself, and I really, through my training, had to teach myself the less I'm talking, the more I'm sometimes achieving, and I can put a lot of things into visual aids that then the child can use at their own speed, at their own processing time, which makes it much easier for your child to comprehend often. And that is for children with special needs and without. Learn sequencing. Now, even Lego picked up that fact, that actually the importance of sequencing. And again, we'll go into a little bit more detail in the beginning, in a minute. Apologies. Use technology. I think you already had a very good talk on how to use technology at the moment, but I think there's really nothing out there that will stop you from using technology. I use technology as an OT all the time. Smartwatches are great for reminders, etc. So use technology because it's available to you, and it's a great asset to as a therapist as well. Aids and adaptations. Again, I will give a couple of examples in a minute to see what you can use and what's out there. Record your progress so that you and your child can see what you're making, how you're moving forward. It's very easy to forget when you're teaching your child life skills to see how far you've come, and actually to stay motivated. It's sometimes really quite nice to look back over your record and saying, look, this is what we have achieved. How great is that? Rewards. I think everyone's seen Super Nanny now these days, and there's lots of programs, lots of schools use rewards. They can be instant for some children. Some children like to save them up to work towards a bigger goal. Again, rewards are just a great way of keeping motivation going for you and for your child. It could be that you have a reward together. It could be that you go for an ice cream afterwards together and have a nice time. But it just helps children to relate to maybe things that they don't enjoy doing so much to something that they enjoy doing. Give plenty of time to for repetition. I'm saying that because, you know, it's really important. If you think of a toddler that sits in front of the bucket and will put the blocks in and the blocks out and the blocks in and the blocks out, and as adults we go, oh my God, that must be boring. But actually for a child, it's success, and it's practicing, it's overlearning. And I think sometimes we shy away from enough overlearning, and with repetition not only do we become more sufficient in what we're doing, but also it's building up the strength alongside it. And be creative. I will give you a couple of ideas what you can use today, but I'm sure if we opened up the room, there's so much things out there, and I go on the internet quite a lot and type into search engines if I look for a certain skill that I need to practice, because there's always new aids, always new ideas that people come up with, and you don't need to be an OT for that. I learn lots from the families and the that I work with, because they often come up with some really inventive ideas. So let's look at a couple more things in more detail. So backward chaining. Some of you might have heard of that term already. If you type it again into any of the search engines, you will find a lot of examples for it. So it basically involves breaking down the tasks into small steps and teaching the child the last step first. And what that means, you can see on this chart. So normally a child, when you put a shirt on or t-shirt, a jumper on, you put the t-shirt or the jumper over your head, you put one arm in, then you put the other arm in, and then you put the jumper down to your waist. Now, once you've done all of that, you have the success of the jumper being on. The technique of the backward chaining is that you teach your child the last step first successfully, because then they will also end up at that success of having the jumper on. So what does that mean? You do the first few steps. So you help your child to put the shirt over their head. You help them to put both of their arms in, and then the child will start off with just pulling the jumper down to their waist. Once they've done that successfully, and you can praise them about that, next time they maybe just put the second arm through. Once they can do that, they put both arms through. And then once they master that, you teach them how to do everything from the beginning. So as I said, by just turning it around, you will always end up as a success. Whereas if you start on the first step by putting the jumper over your head, often that's a big struggle, isn't it? And then the child gets already frustrated by the time you get to the end. I find it, especially for smaller children, when you are doing dressing tasks, a really motivating and positive way of teaching children life skills. Goal plan, do check. That is based on the co-op model, and yes, it's written like the shop co-op. So again, if you want to put into Google co-op model for children with difficulties, especially motor difficulties, and it's a program that's more aimed at the cognitively able children. But when I say cognitively able, children that can follow some sort of sequence and can have a discussion about what they find tricky. So it is a motor-based programs, and again, it's looking at sequencing, and it's looking at what part of an activity a child can't do. So for example, your child gives you the goal, I can't skip a rope. Okay, and then you have to think about, okay, how do I achieve that? So you give your child a couple of times the opportunity to show them what they can do so far. And then you talk it through with them and do a task analysis and saying, okay, what is it that you can't do? Is it swinging the rope, or is it actually lifting your feet off the floor and jumping over the rope? Once you establish that, you then practice just that bit of the task that the child can't do. So for example, if it's the child can't lift their feet off the floor when they're jumping, you could, for example, just put the rope straight on the floor and just get them to jump over it, backwards and forwards. And again, I come back to repetition. That can be quite a lot of time. Once they're mastered that step, you can ask them to try and skip the rope again and see how they get on with that one. If they then can clear the space, it could be that it's swinging the rope. So maybe you practice with skipping the rope by you swinging the rope, and then the child being able to do it over time themselves. So it's always about that task analysis, but it's helping the child to recognize which part of the step they can't do and go from there. And then always doing that checking afterwards. Did my plan work? Are we moving forward? Are we achieving that step that we felt we couldn't do it? And help your child to self-evaluate without it being critical. But as I said, by then being able to jump suddenly, which they couldn't do before, it's already a success in itself. Try and be creative again around it. Try strategies that your child might even suggest. They might come up and say, rather than jumping over the rope, can I jump up and down the stairs? Of course you can. So try and listen to your child as to what they're trying to do, but also try and tell them, do you think that's the right way to doing it? Maybe let's try it in a different way, and do it playful, as I said before. So those are the two sort of things that techniques that I use quite a lot: go, plan, do, check, but also the backward chaining. Visual aids. Now I'm sure if I would be able to look around you, quite a lot of you know quite a bit of what I'm showing here. When you go shopping with your child and you want to teach your child to be part of that, take a shopping list for themselves, so that they can tick off. They have their little shopping trolley, maybe even themselves, or they have a special bag where they put their shopping in. It's a lot more motivating than if a child has to just hold on to the trolley and walk around you and gets more and more bored afterwards. By visually, they can see that step forward, and they can see that they're achieving. Similar with, we talked about dressing quite a bit this morning already. If you do a dressing chart that you hang up for your child upstairs, because they can do the individual steps now, but every morning you have to remind them again, put your trousers on, put your jumper on, put your shoes on. By doing a sequence like that, you take all of that talking out, and the child can again process that in your own time, and they can come down and hopefully are dressed by the time come down. Success for you, because you don't have to talk as much, and that frustration and often the sort of negative feeling around that can be eliminated, and the child feels it's done something independent. Quite a lot we use the visual timetables, just so that a child knows what's happening during the day. Predictability comes in, makes it much more safer for a child to know what's coming next. And then again, it's not that asking, what do we do next? What do we do next? What do we do next? But also for me, often families use visual timetables during their school time, and then they don't during holiday times. My recommendation would be do it during both. I think it's really vital to continue that, because it's something visual that your child relies on, and there's nothing to say that you can't do it at any time. You can even have a little visual timetable in your pocket, couldn't you? For those children who find it a little bit harder to cope with a whole visual timetable, you can do a now next board, and when they can do another step, the now next and then, just again to prepare them for what's happening next, which can give a lot of reassurance, and can give, makes the child more settled in terms of knowing what to do. And just to say here, some people use pictures, some people use photos. For some children, seeing themselves or seeing people that they're familiar with in the photos can be more motivating and more reassuring. So instead of a picture of a house and writing underneath Nanny's house, you maybe have a picture of Nanny's house, so the child knows we're going now in the car because we're driving to Nanny's house. Sequencing. Now, sequencing is really, really close to my heart, and I mentioned already, Lego, it has picked up on that fact that, you know, if you break down anything into a visual sequence, any complex Lego task will be achieved. And they even start now with the big Lego Duplo, which you can get for toddlers. They're even starting those with 2 to 3 figures, 2 to 3 step sequences, building a giraffe or a plane. And because Lego understand that once you understand the pictorial sequence, anything, and I really seriously mean anything, can be broken down into a pictorial sequence. So here you can see a child is shown how to thread all of those blocks. If you have a picture of a sequence where you want the blocks into a certain order, you can put that in a sequence. The more your child learns to follow pictorial sequences, the more you can do. Now, I remember I was on a training for exactly sequencing, and I did ask the trainer, so what can I do with really difficult things like watering a plant? Because you'd never quite know how much water the plant needs in that moment in time. And he said, Bridget, why don't you take a picture of that plant? You use a certain cup every time you want that that plant to be watered, and then you measure how many cups of water that you think that plant needs, and then how often you have to do that. So you have to observe that for a week or so, and then you take a picture of that plant, you take a picture of that cup, and you maybe make a symbol of ×2 next to the cup. So you know that plant needs 2 cups of water for that plant. So that's why I'm really saying it's really, really important, and you can progress that to whatever you want to. You can have written instructions, you can have pictorial sequences. What is a cookbook? A cookbook is a step-by-step guide in how to follow a recipe. So it shows that as humans, we're really following those instructions quite well. It gives us that guide as to what we need. So sequencing is really, you can never start too young, too small with sequencing, really. And the next thing, be creative. Really don't be afraid to try and do something different. So I had a family that came to me saying, we're really struggling putting the right shoes on the right feet for my child. So the child really liked to have her toenails painted. So we then come up with the idea, well, how about we put all the toenails on the right foot in green and all the toes on the left foot in red, and then we bought red and green socks. So on the right foot we always had the green socks, on the left foot we always had the red socks, and then we put stickers into the shoes, again corresponding to the right colors. And this is how we taught the child to put their shoes on without mum having to explain to her every time which shoes go on the right foot. And again, some might say, yeah, but what if my child never learns that without the colours? Does it matter? You can always have green socks on one foot and red socks, or you change the colours in between. But there's nothing wrong in continue to using those aids, no matter for how long that is required. Aids and adaptations. Velcro shoelaces, I touched on that already earlier. You don't always need shoelaces. These days we can use Velcro, and they go up into a much, much higher age range now than they used to. Velcro versus buttons. I know that a lot of schools now have shirts instead of polo shirts, and then it's a question, how do I do those buttons if my child can't do buttons? Put a strip of Velcro inside both of them so that buttons are on the top, and do it that way. There's nothing stopping you. You know, you're still following the same guidelines with regards to uniform, but you're using a technique that might work for you and your child and take some of that stress out. Clip-on ties, quite an easy one. Quite a lot of schools use them now. Elasticated shoelaces are coming back to the shoes again. You can buy elasticated shoelaces that you can tie up, and then a shoe becomes a slip. Even a lace shoe becomes a slip-on shoe. Bath plugs that change color, coming back to the calculated risk. Now, using the bath and knowing how hot the water is often quite a difficult one to judge. There are bath plugs that change color with heat. So have a look around. There will always be a little aid that can help you. Kettle tippers, if you're afraid that your child can't tip the kettle safely to make a cup of tea or to make themselves a pot noodle, there is a sort of container that you can sit your kettle in, and then all you have to do is sort of use one finger to tip the kettle and have the cup placed underneath, so you lose that weight of the kettle, and it's a lot more direct in tipping it in. Trikes. Again, a lot of children want to follow their peers in terms of being able to do what they want to do, but some children just will never learn to ride a bike. Then use a trike. At least they can follow their peers, they can have fun with their peers. And again, I see a lot of adults these days driving around with trikes. They become more and more popular, which used to be a sort of, oh, my child can't ride a bike. Does it matter? Does it matter if they drive around on 2 wheels or 3 wheels? Same with scooters. If they always stay on the 4-wheeled scooter, but they can bomb around with their friend, it doesn't matter. School bags and wheels, I like those very, very much. You can see a lot of children, especially children whose joints are a little bit more lax than others, who complain a lot about pain when they're carrying out their school bags. Use little trolley bags. You know, we can see them, you can buy them anywhere these days, and it can just make that walk to school so much easier than if you have to carry the bag for your child all the time because it becomes too heavy. So then I think I made a bit of time up. I tried to make a little bit of time up, so I hope I haven't spoken too fast either. And I want to talk a little bit about the 3 things that I would like you to take away from today. Observe your child and know exactly what it is about the task that they find tricky, and allow them to show you what they find tricky. We talked about building up relationships before. You know, it is really, really important that we build that trust up with that child, that they can come to us and saying, I find that tricky, because only when you know that can you put either the right technique, practice with them, or the right adaptation aids in place for the child to succeed in that skill. And once you succeed, that's when then your relationship flourishes again, and you have that success and you have that shared enjoyment, which is so, so important, isn't it, when we try and help our children develop in further ways in order to meet their potential. Practice when you're not under pressure. As I said, I've spoken about that quite a lot, but I really, really urge that. Practicing cutlery skills when you're trying to feed your child is really, really tricky, and it's tricky for the child because they're often very hungry when they come to meal times. For them, it doesn't matter if they hold their fork and knife in the right hand or if they cut the meat rather than ripping it apart. Practice cutlery skills by maybe just making some pancakes on an afternoon when you've got a bit of time, and then get the knife and fork out and practice with something. And it gives you time then to think about and to prepare what it is that you want to achieve. And then you can have fun around meal times, and you can have a joke, and actually the child can enjoy the food that you cooked for them, rather than that nagging around. You know, sit straight, use your cutlery properly. And as I said, use aids and adaptations. They are there to be used. And I often say to families, you know, no one queries that I'm wearing glasses. That's an aid in adaptations, but it's what we call a socially acceptable one. But no one would say, well, you've worn your glasses now for a few years. Is it not time for you to get rid of it? Aids and adaptations are in exactly the same way. If it makes you and your child's life easier and they become independent in that skill, it really doesn't matter if they forever have a sticker in their shoe to show them which is the right foot and which is the left foot. and be creative. As I said, there's so many things out there that you can use these days, that are fun to use, and that just make it more motivating for you and your child. Yeah, and I just want to finish that slide with the saying that I very much like: teach me and I'll forget, show me and I may remember, involve me, I'll learn. And that's by Benjamin Franklin. I really, really hope that you enjoyed and managed to take something away from this conversation. I apologize about the technical issues that we had at the beginning there, but I hope I made the time up so you're not missing too much of your lunch. And yeah, I am very, very happy to listen to any of your questions, and hopefully I can answer them.
Thanks, Birgit. You handled that really well. It was a brilliant presentation. We've had a lot of questions submitted, so we'll try and get through as many as we can.
Yes.
Our first question is, are there any tips on balancing development of healthy dependency in a child who is independent due to trauma whilst fostering independence, or does this need to be in line with more time spent in relationship development?
Okay, so there's quite a lot of things in there. So let's come first of all to the trauma element, and that relationship building. I think the relationship building should always come first. Child with trauma has experienced a lot of failure in their life, and therefore the trust in the adults and the people around them is often quite low. And therefore trying something new is also quite difficult for them, because it means I have to put my trust out there, which is it's not been really positive experience for them right now. So that's one thing. So I would say, yes, always put the relationship first, have fun first before you challenge the child in an area where they don't succeed. But on top of that, the other thing that I would like to bring in there, really have a look at where the child is developmentally. Children with trauma often haven't had the opportunity to develop in the way, and haven't been given the right environment to develop and to practice skills. So they're already developmentally probably slightly behind. So I would then look what where therapists differentiate between where their developmental age is and where their chronological age is, and really practice where their developmental age is. So, for example, a child is in school, they're 7, 8 years of age, but actually because of the trauma that they experienced emotionally, they maybe present more to 4, 5-year-olds. Now, as a 7, 8-year-old, we would expect handwriting to become quite fluent, but not with a 4, 5-year-old. So what I mean by that is adjust your expectation that you have on your child more based on the developmental level rather than the chronological age. So yes, I hope I answered that well, because it was quite a long question. Yes, for me, relationship building, absolutely first, but you can do some fun things and develop relationships with that. For example, through baking, and you develop their fine motor skills and maybe their cutlery skills while you're doing something fun. But the most important thing is you have fun and you build that relationship, and then you start with that, with developing their skills, but look at where they're at developmentally. Sorry, I hope that answered the question.
That's great, Birgit. Thank you. Our next question is, how do I put teaching life skills into practice as a play worker?
Okay. As a play worker, so I'm assuming you're in a nursery or you're in a school or you're going to people's homes. I'm not quite sure. So I'm trying to, again, and answer this as broadly as I can. A lot of things you can do through play. So why don't we get the dollies out and we have a tea party? And in that tea party, we have to cut up a muffin. So in that tea party, we suddenly have a knife and a muffin in which we can cut up the muffin into pieces, or we can use a banana, and with the skin on we have to cut that banana, which is really quite tough, isn't it? So you can develop your cutlery skills like that. And then also the other thing that Dolly needs to do, she needs to put her party dress on. So let's get some clothes out to dress Dolly. Ah, and do you think we need some different socks as well? So let's try some socks on that I brought along with me. So can you see, you can do things very, very playfully and often in relation to either the dolly or, you know, the teddy bear, or for older children, it could be that you um, think of, do you know, we do a bit of role play today and we're pretending to go to a party and you have some dressing up stuff there. So you then have, you know, different trousers that they need to try on, or different tops that they need to try on with different fasteners. So you can then explore different fasteners while you're doing this really funky thing of getting dressed up. So there's lots of ways, I think, as a play therapist that you can build life skills in.
That's great. Thank you. Our next question is, do you have any tips for children who give up immediately if they find something difficult or uncomfortable?
Yeah, this is one of the big things, and I think this is where talking about relationship building, this is really, really vital. My tip would always be, first of all, do lots of things that the child is good at, so that the child can recognize with you that they can do something and that you can recognize that they're good in. And then you can always tell, well, this one is a bit tricky, but you managed this one very easily. So I'm just trying to think of a good example. So you could say, um, yeah, buttons, for example. Buttons is really tricky, isn't it? Let's do some button races. And you race either against your own time or you race against daddy. Or mummy, or whoever it is you're practicing with. So if you, for example, practice having two shirts next to each other and you have a race against each other. Now, you as an adult know you can adjust your speed very well in comparison to the child, so that the child has that feeling of success. In the child doing practicing against themselves, isn't so you can say, do you know what, I time you now for 1 minute and we see how many buttons you can do in that 1 minute. And then the next time you say, do you know what, you managed 3 buttons in that 1 minute, which is a lot, isn't it? But do you think you could just manage one more? And then, so by practicing against their own skills, they're often more likely to succeed, which means they're then more likely to practice then again. Or competing against an adult that can, you know, not necessarily win, but let them win. So those are the sort of techniques that work for me, but always often start with an activity that you can share where you know your child will succeed, because then you can always fall back on something. Do you know what? You've just done that really, really well. I know this is a bit more trickier, but I'm sure you can get there, just like the other thing that we just did before. So always start with something positive to then go over to the tricky bit and then maybe finish off with something that's successful for the child again.
That's great. Thank you. Our next question is, my 13-year-old child has a recent diagnosis of autism and OCD. We struggle with routine on a school morning, particularly parting her hair. We can spend hours trying to get this perfect. We've tried most things, visual aids and distraction techniques, etc. Any suggestions would be helpful.
Hair is really tricky, especially girls with long hair, and they're often very, very particular around it. Um, for me, it would be good to know a little bit more around it, what you're struggling with. So again, I would practice maybe playing hair salon on the weekend, and then really see which is the part that you're struggling with. So often a child with ASD and OCD, when they wake up in the mornings, their arousal levels might not be at the right time. They can be very sensitive then to have their hair groomed. So it could be that you start off with starting the morning with really nice piece of music that you all enjoy and can dance to. What that does is you're changing your arousal levels. You're already doing something positive. And then maybe have a certain song during which you do the grooming. But again, through that positivity, you sometimes reduce the anxiety of the task in hand, which also in return reduces the sensitivity around grooming. So that can be one positive aspect, but also, as I said, I would practice maybe on the weekend again. It's difficult for me to suggest any other things in terms of techniques because I would have to see your child exactly what they're doing and what you've tried. But I think, increasing arousal levels for children with autism in the morning can be quite a big life changer because they're already more positive in terms of what they have to, and allow yourself plenty of time. Sometimes when I look at the morning routine with parents, it only allows sort of, maybe 5 minutes for the hair. Maybe get that 10 minutes up earlier in order to allow a bit more time so that the child can actually have a little bit more control over what you're trying to do because there is more time for it.
That's great, thank you. Please could you expand on rewards and how to use them effectively as to not form compliance with a masking ASC child?
Sorry, could you repeat that question, please?
Yeah, of course I can. Please could you expand on rewards and how to use them effectively as to not form compliance with a masking ASC child?
Okay, so rewards, again, very, very big topic. So in my experience, children with autism find it harder to have the longer lasting rewards. So for example, the marble jars, etc., because they're not instant enough. Now, I'm not expecting you as carers or families to go out there and buy big presents for your child every time they do something positive. But I think having more instant rewards that they know exactly what is coming. So for some of them, it could be as little as Pokemon cards, which they collect and then can put into their collection. And then over time, you build they can maybe have just one Pokemon card, and then depending on what they have, you can have a whole pack of Pokemon cards. The other thing would be to really have an understanding what you're rewarding for. Okay, so you don't want to set yourself up to fail, and you have to be able to be instant when you need it. And this is why I often like portable things like the Pokemon cards or like a piece of Lego in order for them to be able to build a Lego that they want to. It needs to be instant enough, and it needs to be something that is motivating for them. And that can change quite a lot. I do get that 1 minute it's a Pokemon card and the next minute it's something else. And you could put a little bit of a contract around that with your child. So you could say, do you know what, today I would really like us to get ourselves dressed, for example. And once you got dressed, once you got your trousers on yourself today, I have a pack of Pokemon cards waiting for you. And then the child say, well, I don't want a Pokemon cards. Okay, and maybe have two choices. Well, you can either have the Pokemon cards or you can have that car. So give the child a little bit of a choice in that moment of time, but don't expand too much. If they can't do it in that moment in time, maybe try and do those life skills another time again and not challenge them in that moment. But especially with children with autism, an instant reward works better than a glass jar, which they have to build up over time.
That's great. We have time for one more question. The question is, my son has ASD and ADHD. Have you got any tips for children who struggle in sports day or even just running with his friends? He gets frustrated when he can't keep up and either ends up throwing himself on the floor or ends up on his own at playtime, especially if his friends are playing tag.
Yeah. I think I'm completely with you. As an OT, I do not like sports day because there's a lot of children or the level of development in terms of ability of sport varies very much at all different ages, and there's always children that really, really struggle. Um, I if we come first to the sports day, I would really approach your school. A lot of schools become much more flexible in terms of the type of tasks that they're setting the children in order to be able to succeed. So it could be that the child is maybe throwing some beanbags in a reef rather than doing the running. And I think if you challenge your school on that one, or having a positive discussion around that, is there not a couple of activities that they could do that children who can't run fast could join in as well? In terms of playtimes, if you've got the opportunity to teach your child different games that they could suggest with their friends to play. So it could be, again, something where they swap Pokemon cards, or it could be something that doesn't involve as much running. And then you could maybe invite one or two of their friends around to their house and you can teach them that game. So when they then go back into the playground, they can play that together and they have that shared enjoyment. So again, have a look at what your child's interested in, what they enjoy doing in the garden. It could be, as I said, hopscotch, or it could be a jumping, or it could be a sitting down game where they take cards in. Excuse me, I can say my son often takes playing cards in, and they have a game of cards rather than running around. But unless the other children know that game, they're not likely to join in, which is why I said, do you know what? Either ask the teacher again to introduce different type of game during playtime, or invite the kids around to your house and introduce that group of friends.